of you are doing good. So today the lesson that we are going to cover is lesson number 4, How I Taught My Grandmother to Read by Sudhamurthy. So what are we going to learn in this lesson? First of all, we are going to talk about the author, the introduction of the lesson, then the lesson and the explanation of it, then the summary, and then the question answers. So let's begin. So let's start by talking a little about the writer of the lesson, Sudha Murthy. Sudha Murthy was born in 1950 in Shigaon in North Karnataka. A prolific writer in Kannada, she has written 7 novels, 4 technical books, 3 travelogues, and 2 collections of short stories. So travelogues means a lecture, slideshow, or motion picture describing travels. So she was born in Shigaon in North Karnataka. She is an upcoming writer in Kannada, and she has written 7 novels, 4 technical books, 3 travelogues, and 2 collection of short stories till now. Her previous English book, Wise and Otherwise, has been translated in 13 Indian languages, and it's a big achievement for any writer, right? Her stories deal with common lives and human values such as charity, kindness, and self-realization. As a sensitive writer, she writes about the suffering of the people. Since she is a sensitive writer, she writes about human values, what a person goes through in his normal life. So she writes about all that. She talks about charity, kindness, self realization, human suffering in her stories. The main characters in all her books are highly educated, non compromising, and highly principled women. So, the main characters in all her books are these, highly educated, non compromising, and highly principled women. She talks about women empowerment. She shows women as strong personalities in her stories. All right, so let's start with the introduction of the lesson. The writer narrates her real life experience. She lived with her grandparents. They got a weekly magazine which was her grandmother's favorite. So there is this weekly magazine which is the narrator's grandmother's favorite. And in that weekly magazine, there is the story which is published. Okay, so it's her favorite story. As her grandmother could not read, she would read out to her. As her grandmother was uneducated, so this girl used to read out the story for her grandmother. One day, when the magazine arrived, the writer was away, and her grandmother was helpless as she was unable to read her favorite story. So, one day, when her granddaughter was not there at home, she was unable to read her favorite story because she couldn't read. She shared her feeling with the writer and learned reading. So when she shared her feeling with her granddaughter that she was unable to read her favorite story and she was really sad about it, then her granddaughter decided to teach her reading. The writer gives us the message that we are never late to learn. If we have a desire, we can learn anything and everything. So the writer in this lesson gives us message that we are never old to learn. We can learn, at any point of our life or at any age. If we have a desire, if we have strong will of doing something, we can learn anything and everything. All right, so let's begin with the lesson. My grandmother, Krishtaka, never went to school. So, this lesson is being narrated by a small girl, and she's talking about her grandmother here. So, she's saying that my grandmother, Krishtaka, never went to school, and therefore she could not read. Every Wednesday, the magazine Karmavira would come, and I would read the next episode of the story Kashi Yatre to her. So, since her grandmother never went to school and therefore she couldn't read, every Wednesday there is this magazine which used to get published, and this little girl used to read out the episodes of a story, Kashi Yatre, to her, which was her favorite story. During that time, she would forget all her work and listen with the greatest concentration. So, since the story was her favorite one, so whenever this little girl used to read out the story to her grandmother would leave all her work and listen to the story with greatest concentration and excitement and interest. Later, she could repeat the entire text by heart. So she used to listen with such great concentration that next time she could just repeat the entire text by heart. She without any fumble or without any break. My grandmother never went to Kashi like the protagonist of the story, and she identified herself with the latter. So why grandmother was so interested in the story? Because she used to relate herself, she used to identify herself with the protagonist of the story, the main character of the story, because just like her, the protagonist of the story had never gone to Kashi. So, more than anybody else, she was the most interested in knowing what happened in the next story. So, because she used to relate herself with the main character of the story, she used to be very, very excited about the next episode and to know what is going to happen in the next episode of the story. Once I was away for a week for a marriage in a neighborhood village. When I returned home, I saw my grandmother in tears. So once it happened that this girl was not there at home, she went in a neighborhood village for a marriage. And when she returned home, she saw her grandmother in tears. She saw that her grandmother was crying. I was surprised. So, obviously, when she saw her grandmother crying, she was taken aback and she couldn't understand that what has happened. For I had never seen her cry even in the most difficult situations. What had happened? So, this little girl, when she saw her grandmother crying, she was very, very shocked because she had never seen her grandmother crying even in the most difficult situations. Her grandmother is a very, very strong lady and she had never cried in